We spend so much time debating what makes a great athlete: talent, work ethic, and discipline. But at the highest level, everyone has those. So, what really separates the great from the rest is what happens mentally when pressure hits, confidence wavers, and everything starts to break down. Hello, everyone. I'm DJ Hamilton, and welcome to DJ Sports Show, a place where we talk sports, have stories told, and make a difference. And on today's show, for the very first time, we're diving into a different sector of sports, as today's special guest has built his career around the mindset of an elite athlete. What builds them up? What systems do they build to overcome adversity? And today's special guest is none other than Dr. Adam Wright, who's an elite performance sports coach, performance consultant, and co-founder of the Antifragile Academy, where mindset isn't about motivation, it's about building systems that hold up under stress. If you're someone who's about the growth mindset and building systems to have a successful life, whether you're an athlete or regular person, this episode is for you. It's the first time ever doing this on the show, and I had a great conversation with Adam during the Christmas break, as I hope you guys get a lot out of this. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and share anybody you know who loves sports. And listen on any audio platforms tomorrow, leave a 5-star rating and share anybody you know. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. What's up, everyone? I'm DJ Hamilton, and you're tuned into the DJ Sports Show, where we give you the latest, greatest, and most exciting sports stories in the world of sports. From interviews to having people's stories heard and told. This is the DJ Sports Show. Let's get it! Adam, welcome to DJ Sports Show. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. We just get off a little conversation to start things off, but yeah, I'm happy to be here and have a conversation.
Well, yeah, breaking the ice, that's what we love to do here on the show.
Got to warm it up. Got to prime it.
How was your Christmas, by the way, before we start?
Everything was great, man. Santa was very good to us, so everything was great. Thanks for asking.
Christmas has been great because all the snow we've been getting lately, I'm like, man, last few years, I don't remember all this snow. We already had like 3 snowstorms already, and it's only December.
Yeah, I'm in New York, so in New Jersey, so things slow down a little bit, which is nice to have things slow down a bit.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Adam, every person I've had on the show like to always like the guests to know, where did you your background? So you're a well-renowned sports performance coach with a focus on philosophy and performance. But let's take it back where it all began. Where did you grow up, and how did your early experiences shape your mindset, values, and definition of success?
It's a good question, right? Because I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, and I don't know if you know Trenton. It's not necessarily the breeding place for academics, let's say. And I think I was the first person in my father's family ever to get through high school. So I don't come from a very academic family in that sense. So the way I like to say is like where I grew up, pressure wasn't theoretical, right? That was normal, right? So I remember in many ways sports saved my life. I went to college to play baseball, even though I quit early on, but it got me out of Trenton. And I remember I want to say the first year I went to college, 2 of my best friends went to jail. So I grew up in the not typical kind of arena for people like me. But what that does, it allows me to have a lot of empathy and understanding for people in sport who grew up in lower SES environments. I call myself a blue collar academic. I didn't live in an Ivy Tower. I grew up on a street, and I know what it's like to have a little common sense beyond just some book smarts. Effort mattered when I was growing up, but it didn't guarantee success. You could work your ass off. It doesn't mean that daddy was going to get you a job. And I do think, that distinction makes a difference, right? And that's largely shaped me and shaped how I operate and how I connect with people and athletes.
That's a great way. Man, I didn't know you Trenton, New Jersey. Yeah, that is,
Yep.
that's the hood right there. I ain't gonna lie.
Yes, it is.
It definitely is.
It wasn't that way all the time though. When it was, it's gotten worse and worse, but growing up in a city changes things. It changes the entire, all the rules of the game in a lot of ways, right? I think more than anything, probably it's taught me something I use every day. It's like pressure doesn't create character, right? But it reveals the strength underneath. It really does show you how you are. And I had that from early on.
No, that's great. And that's helped build you to who you are today, which is
Absolutely.
great to see. So, where did your passion for sports originate? Who was the first to introduce you to them? Was it your dad or was it somebody else when you were a little kid?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. My father wasn't an athlete. He was more of an outdoorsman, so he couldn't throw a ball. He couldn't tell you the difference between a touchdown and a home run. Um, yeah, I think I just had some talent early on, and it got picked up, and some coaches that took me under their wing. I had an uncle that took me under his wing. I like sports because, it's the rules are clear, man. You showed up, you competed, everybody was equal, right? And what you did gave you the feedback, and if you were good, like that's how you earned your spot. So it was a great place for me to exist and find kind of a life and a connection with people as an only child I didn't have. So that team was really important to me. It became my family, and I like the grind. I always liked the grind. I played a lot of different sports, but ultimately baseball was kind of where I found myself, and that's kind of where I took off.
And one thing you just mentioned that really stood out to me is how you say you're only child. I think sports is so great in a metaphor of life because it teaches you about communication skills, how to adapt to different
Yes.
personalities and people, how to tolerate different people, and even if you don't like them, what you're
Yes.
going to do as you get older in the workforce, and just being able to overcome conflict resolution and work together and communicate with each other. I think especially you having
100%.
that as an only child helped you as you got older, especially because you didn't have siblings. So you got to know how to interact and learn how to interact with others, why I think sports is so great for anybody. Even if you don't play professionally, it just teaches so many key life skills.
That's a perfect example. And that's what it comes down to. It teaches the skills itself. It tells you how to lead and be led. It tells you how to fail, tells you how to succeed, tells you how to grind, all the skills you need for life. And also, like, just for a lot of people, particularly if you don't have that father figure as a male or even as a female, you do feel people, you find people to look up to and to have to model, which if you don't have that in certain communities, it's invaluable.
Nah, for sure. One thing I also wanted to mention is so you mentioned you played baseball growing up. How did that experience show you that the mental side of performance is just as important as the physical?
So if anybody knows baseball, I played a lot of different sports, but more competitively, baseball, it's a game of failure. We talk about this all the time, right? You fail constantly and you fail publicly, right? So I think for me, that's where it really clicked. Like you could prepare like very similar to people in terms of physically, but under pressure, one stays clear and can operate and can fail and get right back up, and the other tightens up and ultimately unravels. And that gap isn't about mechanics. It's not about training, right? It's not about physicality. It's about your attention. It's about your nervous system. It's about your ability to regulate and control yourself. And baseball was such a great place to learn all this because maybe golf. At this point, I probably work in about 15 different sports, I would say. Uh, but baseball's probably one of the highest failure rates out of any of the sports. So it's almost Darwinian. You're either going to adapt or you're going to drop out and find something else.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball.
And that is like that used to be rare. When I played, I faced a guy at 90 was different. Now my son plays D1 ball. Like he's seeing 92, 95 every day. It's normal. And these are guys that are never going to have they'll never play step on a minor league team. These are guys who are not going pro and they're still throwing low 90s. The game has changed. All of it has changed. Everything's gotten better and faster. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like over time, like we've seen in football too,
Every
basketball,
sport.
athletes or tennis, we've athletes to everywhere. They're just getting faster, more athletic, smarter, training smarter. We have more advanced technology, better footwear and gear. So it's allowing these athletes to play and, increase their longevity in the sport as well, which is where we're seeing guys like LeBron James playing 20 plus years still at an optimal level because of the technology and the way to take care of their bodies, the
And,
way they're
and
paying
he's
attention to
approached it
detail.
that way. Yes, LeBron
Yeah.
especially. I had a colleague of mine who was his personal biomechanist. I went out and
Wow.
lived with him actually because he had some back issues back in the day. Probably still, I
Yeah.
don't know what his story is now, but he's invested all along his career highly into that kind of training, and it's always mattered to him. The flip side of that, though, too, is with professionalization of sports, kids are starting so young and training so much, and they have so many exposures. You're seeing a lot of chronic overuse injuries. Right, in baseball, we see Tommy John surgery. I mean, it's a real problem. You're seeing in the NBA. How many guys are injured this year? How many top guys are injured this year? With Achilles injuries and so
Yeah.
forth. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we see the flip side of that too.
Yeah, like earlier in this season, like Wemby was out with a calf strain, Giannis out. What
All
I
right.
forgot what he injured. He injured his calf or something like that.
Yeah, whole
Yeah,
lower
I think
extremity.
tore his
Yep.
Achilles, which I was
Yep.
scared of, but luckily it wasn't that. He's out for like a month. And then we had other guys, so many other guys out with injuries. I'm like, it's soft tissue injuries too, which I'm kind of worried because a lot of these guys, they don't play multiple sports anymore, which puts a
Yep.
lot of stress on the joints, on certain joints. And they're playing a lot of these AAU games, multiple games in the weekend, as you get older, and then that attrition starts to catch up, and then you're getting all these injuries to guys who are in their first few years in the league. They're young, which we never
Yep.
used to see.
And that's it. With that kind of volume, those kind of exposures early on, without proper rest, recovery, at the highest level of sport, right? We have an entire team. We have a medical team, part of a medical team, right? Athletic trainers, physical therapists, massage therapists. We have a dietitian. You have a sports psych guy. Like they get coddled and cared for, and they're still getting injured. But then you have kids that are 12, 13, training like pros, but they don't have a team around them. No one's taking care of them. It becomes a revolving door. Okay, you're hurt. I'm going to bring somebody else into the AAU team or the academy team because the volume's so great. You don't matter to me. And it's up to the parents to advocate for their kids, because they're going to get eaten up by the system if not.
Exactly.
It's a business, and that's the reality of it.
And kids don't know what nutrition to put into their body.
No,
They haven't
none of
learned
it.
that yet. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We have strength and conditioning coaches, everything. Every rep, every move is measured. The kids are not, with that many exposures, it's inevitable that they're going to have overuse injuries. By the time they get to the level of pro, it's like they've already played a lifetime of sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially as someone as me who played AAU back in the day. Man, we used to
Yep.
play like 3-4 games in a day. I'm like, man.
Yeah,
And I'm going through growth spurt at that time. 14, my knees were killing me. I'm like,
of course.
how do people do this? 4 games in a
Yep.
day? Man,
Yeah.
that's too much. It's too
Yeah.
much, man.
It's an issue. It's an ongoing. It's across all sport. I remember my son. He had a trial. He was 7. He was trying out for like an academy team for soccer. And after 3 tryouts at 7, they finally met off for a spot. I said, "Great. What days are the practices on?" And he said, "Why does that matter?" I said, "Well, he plays other sports. He plays. He was sport literate. He's played 6 different sports." He goes, "Well, he's not committed to soccer fully. We don't want him." He was 7. They want him to commit at 7. It's absurd, but that's the reality of it because it doesn't fit the business model.
That's wild. 7, and you're telling them they got to commit from 7
Yep.
years old? They're probably in
Mm-hmm.
first or second grade.
Yep. Crazy.
They don't know how to do their times tables yet. That's crazy. What world we live in, man. But
Yes.
yeah. So you began in philosophy, learning about meaning, consciousness, and human flourishing. You then transitioned to psychology and performance psychology. What sparked that switch for you, and how did that shape your career path?
You know, when you look back and you say when you were a kid, you made these decisions even in your 20s, right? You try to connect the dots. So at the time, I don't know if I had any vision, right? Other than philosophy for a kid out of Trenton. It was unusual, right? People from Trenton don't study philosophy. But I was always drawn to that. I was a weird little kid interested in the bigger questions. Um, but when I got out, I worked in corporate life for a while. And what I saw, I remember this. I saw really high functioning people. They made a lot of money and they looked successful by every measure. I was in New York City working for a large firm, but they were exhausted. They were anxious. I would say most of them were probably alcoholics. They were disconnected, and I think underlying that with my philosophy education, graduate degree, and it asked me why, like what was going on here, right? Um, couldn't intervene. I couldn't necessarily help them, but I was really curious. It didn't seem to make sense to me. So I said, I'm going to choose what I really love, and I'm not going to chase money early on. And I went back and I started grad school in applied physiology. I was a strength coach, exercise physiologist when I started my career. And then I found out that sports psychology was a thing because I never heard of it. I didn't even know it existed. I heard Bob Rotella. I don't know if you know golf, but he was like the sports psychologist in golf. He's worked with everybody at this time, by this time, like every pro. And I was like, you could do that job? You could actually have psychology and actually work with athletes? Is that possible? And that's when I fell in love with that. And understanding how mind and body and meeting interact under pressure became something that I became endlessly fascinated in. And I still study it today. It never gets old to me, you know.
It's always evolving, like everything
It's
in
always
life.
evolving. The
Yeah.
research is changing, and I get to work outside of sport too. I work in industry now too, and it's the same thing. The brain doesn't know the difference in terms of the arena; it just knows stress and how it responds, and that's fascinating to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So during your doctoral work at Temple University and clinical training at the Boston Graduate School of Psychoanalyst, what lessons or insights stuck with you and continue to impact your work today?
So, so what this means, right? People know what these degrees are. I have a master's and a
Yeah.
PhD in kinesiology, right? Which is the psychology of human movement for me, applied sports psychology. I was trained as an academic and a consultant, but then I also trained separately as a clinician, right? And did a master's in clinical mental health counseling and actually did some clinical psychology doctoral work. One, in terms of how to make people better, let's say starting at 0 and going to 100. But the other one taught me to get someone at negative 100 and get them to 0, right? So in terms of people who function at the optimal level, but then some people that literally can't get out of bed, or they may be schizophrenic. They literally cannot make a meal. So I've seen the two extremes of human reality, which is fascinating to me. And the one thing that I realized, I would say, through all this education, something like 14 years of graduate work, which is ridiculous, is that performance problems are rarely just performance problems, right? It makes sense. So what I mean by that is that whatever's happening you're seeing on the court or on the field isn't as simple as a biomechanical issue, right? You have to look beneath the execution. You have to look at somebody's nervous system state. What's going on off the field? What's happening in their life? What about their identity? If they're all in on their sport, they have nothing else. How much pressure are they putting on themselves to succeed, right? What emotional patterns, what traumas do these people have from a young age? How's that playing out real time now, right? So I think sports psychology and the clinical training gave me the tools to really translate like the layers of depth, right, of somebody just being a human and how that plays out on the field, right? So I think that's probably the most fascinating thing in what we do. I think we get caught up in seeing people as performers and we forget underneath they're human beings, right? They're not machines, right? And they're bringing every aspect of their experience on the field or in the arena. And we need to be able to treat all that and understand it.
I feel like it's even more pressure nowadays with social media. Their lives are always under a microscope. And then with betting, you see online, people are like, man, this player sucks. Yeah, he didn't hit my parlay. And it's just more added pressure, unnecessary pressure that athletes don't need. They're like, man, you're going to say I suck, but then because I didn't hit your parlay, I didn't get 2 points or something. Like, I just feel like it's just all this pressure nowadays on athletes, even more than ever now,
Yes.
because now betting is legal in some states. And then you have social media, which is just becoming bigger and bigger as the decade goes by and the decades come. So, yeah, I
And
just feel
you're
like it's gotten
talking,
worse.
yes, yeah, it's a great point. You're talking largely pro level, but now you got NIL money funneled to middle school.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
So
getting crazy.
you're basically trying to build a brand before you have an identity. You don't know who you are, and you got to build a brand online. Imagine that, right? So
Yeah,
the pressure starts it's so high and so young, and you don't have the tools. Even the pro guys I work with, they don't have the tools to deal with it. A lot of them, right? So we tell them, get off of social media. Don't even look at it, man. Don't even look at it. There's nothing good to come of it, right? But it's a hard thing to do because it's the reality we work in, and they have obligations too in terms of building a brand,
exactly.
right? So and ultimately this comes to psychological skills and psychological training. It's not necessarily what you were born with. You could learn these things, and you should learn them the earlier the better, right?
Exactly.
Because the idea is not just to survive this model; it's to be able to thrive within it, right? Whether you go pro, that's the least of it, even as a high school kid. Yeah.
The earlier you do start, like the good habits you start when you're a young kid, it carries over to you into adulthood. That's why always tell
Exactly.
people from young age, exercise, eat healthy, drink lots
Yes.
of water, learn manners, know how to be respectful, all that stuff. Because it starts from a young age, your environment and your upbringing. So, and it
Right.
shows as you
Right.
get older.
Absolutely, right? And any cracks in that system are going to be exposed under pressure, particularly when you're performing publicly,
Yeah,
right? It's hard
definitely.
enough being a normal kid. It's a whole nother thing when you're an athlete performing in front of people.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So you taught sports and exercise psychology at
Hmm.
schools like Georgia and Court University early in your
Yep.
career. How
Hmm.
did teaching students help you refine your philosophy before working with professional athletes, CEOs, and other high performers? Because
It's a
we all
good,
got to start from somewhere.
yeah, man. But you have good questions. It's good. Don't ever ask me that, right? Because it's like, how does it help define? I think for me, you know, teaching forces honesty. You 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 got to understand the material. You can't. Can we curse here? Right?
Yeah,
I
you
don't know
good.
if you can curse, but you can't be full of shit, right? If
Yeah.
the students don't understand what you're saying, you don't understand it, right? And that's why, so it helped me strip things down and understand things and to actually allow that theory to transfer to something's useful, right? So I think part of that is really teaching, understanding the foundations of the science is helpful for me because if you get to know a theory really well, it's a good theory, there's nothing more practical when you're sitting in front of a client or a patient. So now I'm looking through the lens of that theory. It helps me understand that behavior. And then it makes it, I know what interventions to use rather than just shooting from the hip. And I think a lot of academics, sometimes they explain it in a way that doesn't make sense because they don't necessarily understand it at the depth that's necessary. So
Yeah.
to simplify things so any kid coming in, a freshman, can understand it, really does show that you know it and you can't hide behind a theory.
Exactly. You don't want to be surface level. You want to be able
Well,
to
it's not
dive
surface
in
level, or
depth.
you speak at such a high level that no one understands what the hell you're saying,
Yeah. You want to find
right?
a middle ground.
Right. You want to make this stuff accessible, and if you don't understand it well, you can't do that. You should be able to explain anything at a level that your grandmother should be able to understand it. If you can't, you don't know it, and
Exactly.
that's what I learned. Being, like I said, being a blue collar guy, that's how I grew up. So as much as I spent time in that Ivy Tower, I was also always to the point was, well, just I want to understand it at a level that I could use it. I just don't want to stay in the clouds because it's not useful to me on the street or on the
Exactly.
field.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like the old saying goes, be a master at your craft, don't be a jack of all trades.
100%, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. You know what that there was another part to that statement. Did you ever hear this? The other part
No.
of this,
What is the other part?
the other part was it was jack of all trades and as opposed to a master of none. The last part of that was it said often better than a master of one. That was not a pejorative statement early on. It was also saying that being a generalist could be a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I talk about this with sport, right? And the idea is being a generalist early on is actually way better than being a master at one. So yeah, so that's actually a good little fact.
That was a nice little metaphor
Yeah,
you did like there.
yeah, it works. It works, but it's also true,
Yeah.
right?
No, that is
None of us
true.
should be none of us should be contributing to a sport till you're 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
Right? We should be playing as many different sports and physical literacy as possible, right? To build
Yeah.
up a strong foundation system.
Because you work different muscles, your mind in different sports requires
Yes,
different things, and then you're more
yes,
versatile. And the more versatile you
yes,
are, the better. And then you won't put so much pressure on so many joints, and then that could help you mitigate and
exactly,
limit injuries going forward as you continue wanting to
exactly,
play at higher levels. So that definitely makes sense.
exactly. Yep.
So you describe performance as a system, not about motivation, but about building stable internal structures of psychology, cognition, and emotional and identity frameworks. How did this philosophy develop, and what daily practices do you recommend for people out there for mental clarity, resilience, and nervous system health?
Yeah. So this could be, let's keep this at a level that we keep our audience engaged, right? Because you could get complex on this. So when I say performance is system, what I mean is this. Pressure is going to expose what is least stable. It could be it could be your nervous system and your training and your underlying recovery. It could be your attention. It could be your sense of self and your identity. It could be why you're playing, your meaning, right? Mindset alone, if that's all we focus on, it can't hold all that, right? Too many people are looking for a reductionist way of training. I just got to get people more mentally tough. I just got to train them harder on the field, right? It's not that simple. It depends upon one's physiology. It depends on one's cognition, right? And mental models and how they see and understand the world. And it has to also do with their emotional regulation, their history of trauma, how they regulate themselves and their anger on and off the field. It's not just so simple. It's not just about confidence and skill set. So, and none of these things work in isolation. They're all playing off each other, right? Based upon your state, based on your trait, based on your developmental period, right? And they learn patterns. So it's all connected in that sense. And I think if we look at it as a one-way system, we're limited, and often we don't get to the bottom of a problem. Does
Exactly.
that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like just like in real life, if you're all over the place and scattered, you're never gonna be able to do that one project or thing you're trying to work on. You got to be able to focus on one thing at a time and knock it out one by one on your goal list. That way, be like, okay, we knocked this out today. Now we go to the next things one by one. Instead of being, okay, I'm working on this, and then I didn't finish, and then you're halfway done. You're not even done. Then you just go to the next thing, the next thing. If you never sit down and just focus on one thing, you're never gonna get anything done.
Right. Now part of that could be your underlying model. Maybe you have some kind
Yeah.
of attention deficit, which that might be
Yeah.
something that needs to be treated. But also maybe you haven't slept well for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So now you're emotionally dysregulated. Maybe you're not eating well. Maybe you just broke up with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and you're so stressed out about that, you can't focus on anything. So that's what I mean. You can't be myopic in your focus and try to understand any kind of, performance deficit or why you can't perform optimally. You got to look at the entire system and not be blinded by what you see first.
Exactly.
Rarely is the first thing the real thing. It's always
Yeah.
something that's a little layered underneath, and you got to get to know somebody, right? And you got to get to trust somebody. That's where my role comes in, right? So people are more likely to talk to me maybe than a coach because I have no vested interest other than their mental health and well-being. The coach is making the judgment on the field, whether you play or stay, right? So they could trust me a little bit more depending on the venue, and it's good to have somebody that you can be honest with.
No, we all need
There
someone
was
we can
another part to
always.
that question I think you asked, but what was the other part? Oh,
No, no, I said
routines?
we always. No, you answered it. I said we
Okay.
always have somebody we always need to open up to, just to let out things, good or bad, without judgment. You know what I'm saying? And having a mental
Yes.
performance coach is always good to have, because then you can just release. Because athletes are already dealing with a lot, and they just need someone who will listen to them. So yeah, it's like your job
It,
is very important.
yeah, and listen, when I played, I didn't get into this, but I went to a small D1 school to play baseball, and I got there and I quit before I even started. And I'm thinking about I can't even tell you why. All I know is if I had somebody like me to talk with at the time, I probably would have played out my 4 years. I just had nobody to share whatever I was angry with, I had nobody to share that with, right? No one that really understood it in a way. And I think it's such an important thing that people like me are involved at every level of sport from early on. I think it'll keep people in the game, number one, but I also think it helps people enjoy the game more, right? To
Definitely.
understand themselves a little bit more. So, yeah. Yeah.
Many coaches focus on only mindset. Why do you think that approach is so common, and why do you think it falls short?
So that's a good question. I think this gets back to the same idea I was talking about that it's more than simple mindset. It's an entire system, right? When you look at a lot of the research, right? Particularly, I'm trying not to go too detailed. It's something called cognitive behavioral therapy. That's where this started. I don't know if you know much about this, but the idea is your thoughts basically form your emotions, right? And we get very irrational in our thought processes and mindsets and these models. And sometimes that helps, right? Sometimes that helps. But sometimes when you try to suppress certain ideas or you get into ideas where you're trying to get more rational in your thoughts, that suppression backfires and it can make it worse. So what you see in interventions now, right? More so, we talked about acceptance and mindfulness approaches. We see how people learn to live with discomfort. We don't have to get rid of it. We're not trying to eliminate these bad thoughts or feelings. We recognize them, we let them exist, but then we do the behaviors anyway. And I think this is a fundamental change in how we work with athletes that are having performance issues, right? The idea is you're not going to outthink a nervous system that's already completely dysregulated, right? You're not going to outthink that. You're not going to get yourself back in by mental toughness. You got to be able to understand yourself and accept that you could be dysregulated, but if your attention's on the right thing at the right time, you could still execute. So mindset training is not wrong. It's essential. It's not complete. It's an incomplete model. You got to deal with the rest of it, right? And a lot of it has to do with understanding your underlying self and how you operate and how you deal with pressure and not necessarily change your personality, but change your behavior under those circumstances. It takes
Yeah,
time, man. This is not
yeah,
something you're going to fix. The problem is people come to me when there's already a problem and say, Doc, help me fix it. It's like, man, we should have been working a year ago so this problem didn't arise in the first place. Now you got yourself in a hole. It's going to take a lot more work because you don't have the tools in place. It's like having a fire in a house, right? It's like, man, it'd be much easier if we fireproof the house rather than run around trying to put the fire out and then build a better structure at the same time. And that's what you're asking me to do. The structure should have been in place already. Right. And that's why this kind of work should start early as kids. You should get this early on in high school, not wait to college or pro level.
exactly. Now I feel like the issue with people my generation and younger,
Yep.
we don't really sit with ourselves. I know how to sit with myself and know how to like decompress, get away from social media. But a lot of people, they're always on scrolling on social media. They're always on their phone or something like that. They don't know how to just sit with themselves, understand themselves, or take time to read a book that's going to improve their intellectuality, or
Yes.
even just listening to podcasts that will help them grow their mind and growth mindset. Like I always refer to my friends, hey, listen to Jay Shetty, listen to Lewis
Yes.
House, listen to Mel
Yes.
Robbins. Those are people I listen to consistently.
Yep.
They bring on experts from different walks and sectors of life about money, mental health, relationships, etc., because it helps you grow your mindset and your different reframes your mind on different perspectives and situations, which has helped me grow a lot over this last year and a half, 2 years.
Well, obviously you're doing something right, DJ. Right? But like, listen, a lot of people they avoid, right? And obviously
Yeah.
we could say these systems are set up with a dopaminergic reward system in a way that they're getting hijacked every day. But for a lot of people too, they're avoiding whatever they don't want to feel. And social media allows that in a very, very simplistic and insidious way, right? It's in
Yeah.
your hand. You don't have to think about it. You have constant
Yeah.
access. Listen, I could walk in. There are days I walk into the clubhouse in a major league dugout, in a major league clubhouse, and guys, 26 guys sitting in their chair, literally not speaking to anyone. Every head is in their phone. Like, what does that do for team chemistry? What does that do for connection? Right? No one is speaking. You could hear literally a pin drop. It's bizarre, right? So if the pros can get taken by this, imagine a kid who's not developed yet, who's 14, 13, just their brain isn't nearly as developed as the 28-year-old guy that I'm working with, and they can't handle it. How's a 13-year-old going to handle this?
That's wild.
Yeah.
I did not know they're all on their phones.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
can't tell them. We can't tell major leaguers, give me your phone.
Yeah.
You might be able to pull that off in a minor league system, but you're not going to pull
Yeah.
that out of a major league system.
Yeah. Definitely
All
not.
right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
And
it's a
that,
problem. It's
uh,
disturbing.
no, definitely. That kind of goes in perfect way segue into my next question. So, from your experience with elite athletes, working with the Washington Nationals and MLB, you worked with the Puerto Rico women's lacrosse national team, and you work with the NJNNY Gotham FC of the MLS. What tends to break down mentally first in athletes, even amongst the most elite ones that you've seen?
It's a good question, right? And I don't want to, that it's a broad stroke, right?
Yeah,
Because everybody's different. But I think what I see at the elite level is clarity breaks down, not motivation. Confidence comes and goes, but it's clarity, right? What I see where people are fragile, the tension starts to narrow on the field, their identity gets really tight. You're right. They just kind of overcommit to just being a player and athlete. They get obsessed with it. On the field, the decision making speeds up. I think that kind of combination, particularly when it comes to performance, right, where you see people go from what I call challenge to threat, it's usually the first thing to crack. They get really, really tight, and all of a sudden they start defining themselves by how they're performing on the field, and there's nothing good to come of that, right? They can't separate. The pressure builds, the tension builds, the self-criticism builds, and then things start to unravel, right? So what I mean by clarity, I mean it's like, listen, you're not simply an athlete. You're a father, you're a lover, you're a son, you're a daughter, you have other hobbies. You got to be something else other than the sport. It's got to happen. Otherwise, this pressure is going to make you crack, right? There has to be other outlets, right? You can have a bad day. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? And I start to see this bleed. When that starts to bleed, I know there's problems. There has to be an intervention.
that was great because that goes right to my next question.
What's
Because
that?
you basically speak about, because many athletes, especially over this last decade with the rise of social media, they have struggled to find their identity outside their sport. I want to ask you, so how do you help clients maintain their purpose beyond performance in a world where success and failure are public and emotional? Because, like I said, with
Yeah.
social media, that over this last decade with Instagram, TikTok, they're getting, and whenever they, especially if they're like an Aaron Judge level, LeBron James,
Yes.
they're always getting photographed. People are like, hey, can I get autographed? It's a lot to deal with. So how do you help them maintain their identity outside their performance? Because I know some athletes probably struggle with that.
We start this early on. I mean, from the moment somebody gets in a system, doesn't matter. We don't wait till injury. We don't wait till retirement. The idea is, it's very clear. If your identity is fused with performance, every moment and every play carries an existential weight, and you can't operate that way. You can't. You have to be free to be creative, right? And to be yourself, right? So the idea is early on, you need to broaden your identity because that I call it psychological redundancy. It's like you may be bad in this domain, you might have a really bad day, but the system doesn't collapse because you always have another way to identify yourself. For a lot of people, I jokingly say, get married and have a kid. You'll stop being a narcissist, and all of a sudden, when you have another mouth to feed, right?
Yeah.
You're not so worried about yourself all the time. And as scary as that is for a lot of people, it snaps them out of that narcissism and that constant worry. Right? Having those outside pressures sometimes, and I'm joking about just having a kid. There's other ways too, take responsibility, but it helps. But that can actually give you freedom on the field because now it's like, oh, now I have some perspective. It's just a sport. It's just a job. Right. And and that, I think that kind of broadened perspective allows people to release themselves a little bit more. And when you feel a little bit more free, you could be yourself. And now you're not defined by everything you do or say. Yeah.
You're playing for something.
It's got to
bigger.
start early, man. It's got to start from day one. It can't start when there's a crisis happening. It's too late.
Yeah.
Right. We have some guys that get injured, like Tommy John's a big thing in baseball, right? Particularly for pitchers. Right, the UCL, they tear the UCL, and it's a 15-month rehab. It's horrible. It's a long rehab. You don't know if you're definitely coming back. There's complications along the way. I have guys. I say start painting. I have guys that start collecting Pokemon cards. I have guys that start house projects. They buy a house. They work. Do something other than your sport, because after those 2 to 3 hours, you have an entire day after rehab. What are you going to do? A lot of guys, all they'll do is they'll play video games. I'm like, that's not enough. You got to create. You got to grow. You got to develop. You can't just play Call of Duty for 4 hours a day, right? Yeah. Or Madden. Like that doesn't work. You're going to get depressed. And that's the biggest fear because there's a strong association with an injury like that and depression. But as long as we develop these other aspects of self, you don't see it. You don't get dark. That shadow's not over you, right?
I can't imagine like active athletes, but I can't imagine retired athletes because they're done with the sport. Trying to find your idea. Like, have you ever dealt with retired athletes? Like, how is
that kind of shit? Absolutely. Yeah, it is worse. If it's not, the idea is this has to be set early on. If they're facing this head on the moment they retire, there's going to be problems. They're going to have some mental health issues, unfortunately, right? Some guys find it. Some guys get stuck with they need that fix, so they end up betting way too. I mean, we know the stories, right? That's where you get into gambling, and because you still want that dopamine fix that you lost. They miss being with the team. So they go out and, they get involved with things they shouldn't be, get to recreate that lifestyle and those feelings. But if we were working on that early on, we wouldn't feel that need. Or at least if a need came on, we know how to express it in a healthy way. We wouldn't get stuck up in some of these behaviors that get us in trouble.
Definitely. No, that definitely makes sense. So you also work with CEOs, award-winning actors, and other high performers I saw on your website. What overlaps do you see between elite athletes and high-performing professionals in business, media, or other creative fields?
So I probably spent half my time I've worked in industry. I worked with everything from, San Francisco Police Department SWAT team to some of the Fortune 100 companies and startup founders and some Hollywood professionals, some people that talked about our work together. Jerry Seinfeld's talked about our work together. So recognizable people on stage. Dude, it's different uniform, same internal game. It doesn't matter, right? The challenge is being stable, staying tethered, staying connected, having clarity under constant evaluation and pressure. It doesn't matter whether you're a pitcher, CEO, actor, SWAT, right? Particularly look at like tactical professionals, right? They make a decision error. It's not a loss of fame or money. They could potentially die. The stakes are really high, right? But the system and interventions are the same. Same, right? How are you dealing with your internal stress? How are you acting under pressure? How are you controlling your emotions? How are you making decisions with clarity? Same idea. You deal with physiology, you deal with cognition, you deal with emotion, right? It's just context changes. So I don't have to be an expert in what they're the content experts. I'm the expert in the brain, and how the brain responds under stress and how the nervous system responds under stress. Everyone, from my perspective, should train in a similar fashion. Whether you're a kid in school dealing with academics and stress of taking tests, or your CEO literally making multi-billion-dollar decisions, doesn't matter.
Definitely. So speaking of your journey, you co-founded the Antifragile Academy in 2022 with your partner, Dr. Nick Holton. How did you first connect with each other, and when did you realize the partnership could become something bigger than just individual work?
That's good. That's good. So Nick Holden, business partner, he's actually an educational psychologist, and it's almost like a Venn diagram. We're both interested in performance. He comes from a positive psychology end, right, in terms of what makes people like flourish and thrive in life. I was coming from more of a clinical and sports psychology end. We worked together. We consulted for a company. We actually were working with the police department together. This was during COVID. And we appreciate how we worked. We said we definitely, and he's a lot younger than I am. We had some similar interests, and then I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago, it was like within a 1 month period, 5 NCAA athletes committed suicide. Yeah, it was in a month. It was like in maybe a 2 month period, and then we got together and said, you know what, we should do something where we take this content and scale it in a proactive way. Because so much of what we do, particularly in the clinical realm, is we're reactive. People come to me when they already have a diagnosis, like a pathology, and then we're fixing the pathology. Our goal was, how do we run this at scale within a curriculum, within departments, so that they don't fall into the realm of getting a diagnosis? They have the tools in place ahead of time, right? And if you look at even some of the biggest D1 programs, they just don't have access. And my friend was running, it was an Ivy League program at a large Ivy League school. I think he had 900 athletes he was responsible for. One guy, right? It's just we give a nod to this idea of mental health and mental performance, but I mean, unfortunately, there's a dearth of practitioners, and schools aren't willing to pay. If you're in a counseling program in a college, it might take you 2 or 3 weeks to see a counselor, and then you're limited to how many sessions you could use, right?
Yeah,
And if you're in a sports team, you might have one practitioner for all the sports teams, right? So the idea was, okay, let's try to put something together that we could run as a curriculum for everybody so it could be scaled and democratized. And that's where we came up with the Antifragile Academy. And we teach, all these evidence-based methods for mental training. And we like the idea of anti-fragile. It came out of a book by Nassim Taleb. And the idea was, when he talked about it, he was like, well, certain systems are robust, right? They're resilient. They bounce back. Certain systems are just fragile. They fall and they break. But there are certain systems, like our musculoskeletal system, that the more stress you give it, it gets stronger,
mm,
right? And I love this concept, right? That it gets stronger with stress, with intentional stress, and what are the tools that are necessary to grow stronger because of it. And that's where it came from. And right now we've been running this program, and we actually presented the United Nations this year. Everything from Sony to Meta. We've really introduced it to a lot of really big programs, running at 5 different colleges. We've been Michigan State girls soccer team, ran it for the last 3 years, and they were actually champions. So it's
hey,
we're having
congrats.
some success with it, yeah, as we expand it.
Wow. No, that's amazing, man. Congrats to all your success too. Well deserved, man. For real. I saw your work on LinkedIn. I was like, I'd like to get this guy on the show if possible. Yeah, because I was typing on ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT. I never dived into the sector of like psychology of the mind for mental performance on the sports side. Yeah, on my show, I've had sports coaches, athletes, and media members. I've gotten different sectors from athletes, coaches, and media people in media. But I never got a mental performance coach, like the mindset of that. I said, let me. He looks like a good first person. Let me get him on. See if
I
he's willing to
appreciate
come on.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's kind of
yeah,
like you said, somebody jack of all trades, right? It's like someone who
yeah,
works across a lot of different sports. But
yeah,
listen, the truth is, it's like parents and coaches are really working as sports psychologists on the ground. They're doing the best they can. But our argument is that there's a lot of really good evidence-based research and information out there that people don't have access to. And the more access and the earlier you get it, the better, right?
yeah.
Both for the athletes and also the practitioners and parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You basically answered my next question from
hmm
earlier. You described the concept of anti-fragility and your mission, which started with unfortunately the suicides from the athletes. So, how do you help high-level performers reframe failure so it becomes an asset rather than a fear? And what separates those who plateau mentally from those who thrive under pressure?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting. If you've ever been to spring training in baseball, right? I'll put it this way, right? Um, there's two gyms. There's the minor league side and the major league side. You got to be invited to the major league side. Most pros will never step over to our gym. They'll never step foot in our gym, right? But it's literally a stone's throw away, right? It's that close, right? So you can see it every day. And the question is, if I said 5 pitchers that go out and do bullpens, and I say, oh, you pick the guy that's going to be on the major league side, right? The likelihood of picking that guy based upon pure physicality and performance, 0. Because they're all exactly the same. They're all throwing 94 to 98 miles an hour. They're all 6'5 plus, right? They all have the nastiest stuff, right? They're beasts, all of them. The difference is their ability to deal with failure. Ultimately, obviously, injury is another issue, but regardless, put that aside. It's their ability to deal with failure, right? It's not about spinning it, right? Failure becomes very useful because it becomes data if their identity isn't on the line, if they don't over-identify with that performance. So from a cognitive perspective, what we see is all failure, right? Every is an opportunity to get better, right? So rather than threatening the underlying system. So what it's like, rather than saying, it's like, what does this say about me when I don't perform optimally? It's more like, well, what is this asking? What is this asking me that I need to develop? What do I need to look more closely at that where I have a weakness in my system? That kind of growth mindset is the difference between people who will make it to the higher level or get stuck or awfully fall off. Right. And my argument is, yes, are there certain personality characteristics associated with this? Yes, that you're born with, right? Nature versus nurture kind of thing. However, everyone can learn to be better. Everyone can train this. And we spend all our time looking at the physical, the tactical, the technical. We just don't spend enough time on the psychological. And it can be trained in the same way. We just don't put value on it because it's hard to measure. It's hard to put under a microscope. It's hard to put a metric on.
Exactly.
But ultimately, it's a difference. It's a difference.
Definitely. People.
When you look at a guy like LeBron, I'm sorry.
No. Say what you're going to say.
No, you look at a guy like LeBron. The guys that are in it, it's not just guys that peak for a year or two. The guys that have staying power, decades of staying power. That's just not physical, man. It's just not. You know, that's a guy who really knows themselves and has the psychological game mastered, the Currys of the world. Like, you go through the list, right? Year after year after year, they can produce and sustain that performance. Yeah, and that's where the psychology comes in. And these guys take it seriously. I know guys that worked with them.
The Jordans, the Kobes, like those guys.
Back in the day, yeah. I mean, if you want to look at a guy, George Mumford. I don't know if you know his work, but look up Mumford. He was one of the first guys to work with Jordan and Kobe back in the day, teaching mindfulness. He actually just wrote a recent book. He's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. I remember Tim Grover was one of their trainers too.
Tim Grover, he was a trainer. He got into mental stuff, but he wasn't really a mental skills guy. He was more on the athletic training side. But George Mumford actually introduced mindfulness training to Kobe and Jordan and all those guys back in the day. He was working with the Bulls. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One acronym I like with FAIL, because I saw it a couple months ago, because people always negate it, but I feel like FAIL means first attempt in learning.
Exactly. I love it.
First attempt
there is no failure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The idea that there's failure is part of buying into this idea of mental toughness, right? And which I don't buy in. I buy into mental flexibility. We got to be able to adapt. We got to be able to grow. So there is no failure. The only failure to me is regrets when you don't give it a try, or you hold back and you don't give your all because you're scared of failing, right? What does that mean? What is that fear really about? And the idea is you don't want to expose yourself. Maybe you're not good enough. Right? Maybe daddy won't love me or mommy won't love me. I don't know what it is, but you got to come face to face with that to be able to put yourself on the line, to be able to fail, to see what you're truly capable of. Otherwise, you're always going to hold back. You're always going to keep a little bit in the tank because you're too scared to give it all.
Exactly. Or you're too afraid with what the outside noise people are going to say about you. You got to be able to block that out.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, if you fear, fear other people's opinions, it's the biggest fear out there. Right? That social comparison, what are people going to say? Until you can work through all that and realize what truly matters, you're never really going to give yourself a chance to succeed. You have to be willing to fail horribly, whatever that means, to allow yourself the chance to truly succeed. Right? Because you got to put your soul out there at that level. You got to be able to bear your soul regardless of outcome. Right?
I saw this online too. A winner is just a loser who's willing to try again.
Yes. Over and over and over again, right? Over and over and over again. And that's why I talk about identity, not over-identifying with you and your performance. Doesn't matter. Back to the drawing board. I got to work harder. What do I need to work on? All it's telling me is where I need to focus my attention. That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And enjoying that process and not being over outcome, on the outcome it's all of it. right? You got to enjoy the grind, the day to day, the Kobe getting up at 4 and putting the hours in. Juan Soto. I worked with Juan for a year. Uh, one of the best hitters in the game, right? He was after every game, 11 o'clock. He's back in the gym training after games, best in the game. And it's like if the young guys see that, like that's the model you want to replicate, right? There's a reason he's that good, and it looks so easy. It's because he's putting the time in.
Yeah, the great ones always put the extra work in. You don't see
Always,
behind the scenes.
all of them, all of them,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What happens in the dark comes to the light.
100%. There was that an Under Armour commercial or a Nike commercial? It was a great. I remember it was a great commercial. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, we've
It's
been
very,
dropping some
very true.
gems here.
Yeah.
Why is anti-fragility so relevant in today's world where performance, visibility, and criticism are constant? Why do you think your brand is so relevant, especially in today's
I
modern world?
I think I think you spoke to it. I think we deal with what environment that's so fast, it's so volatile, it's filled with ambiguity. There's so much chaos in the world. There's so much exposure in social media. Everything's moving so fast. To be anti-fragile means to adapt to it all, right? And I think more than ever, it's probably relevant today. And I think that's the idea, because the alternative is rigidity, is fragility, and that just doesn't work. And being resilient, it's important, but it's not enough. Resilience going back to where you were before, or being robust in the face of it. And the idea is like we live in a world where if you don't adapt, you're going backwards. You're not sitting still. It doesn't exist. So those skills have to be in place. It's really important.
Hmm. From your perspective, what mental challenges are more common today than a decade ago among high performers that you've seen?
So number one is going to be chronic nervous system activation. You never turn off. Part of it's social media, right? You never turn off. Part of it's early training, or professionalization of sports, right? You're constantly under the gun. That's not healthy. Um, I think probably perfectionism is bigger than it ever was because you're constantly visible. You're constantly working on building a brand, and you're obsessed with being perfect, which doesn't exist. Um, I think meaning can erode. I think there's an erosion of meaning over time. It's like, why am I doing this? I'm not finding any joy in my sport at all anymore. What's the point? It's hard to just play for joy and for fun. I think that's really eroded, and that's a real problem. Um, I think ultimately it all comes down to dysregulation, right? All of it. I think our systems are overwhelmed in a way they never were before because of the constant exposure early on and the public scrutiny of our performance. And that's changed everything. It's changed everything. And the money that's flowing at the earliest levels with NIL, it's taking the joy out of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can relate with the brand side because I started this at 19. I was a kid, and I said this is my reps to like hopefully get on air someday, which has helped me get on
Mm-hmm.
radio and stuff like that. And then started adding writing to it. So I'm like, I've been consistent. I've been networking. I've gotten better at something every single year. I cut shorts now with Opus clips. Like I have a tool now, AI tool that helps me cut clips. I adjust it if I need to. And I'm just like, I'm learning, collecting all these skills, adding, I'm like, okay, what else do I need to do to get an opportunity? I've been going to networking events, investing in myself. Because like you said, with building a brand, I used to be very perfectionist. I feel like 2024, I kind of let go. I said, all right, let's not try to be perfect because that's impossible. Let's just try to be the best I can be and put out the best stuff I can do. Because if you try to be perfect, you're going to overthink and you're not going to enjoy it as much anymore. So that's something I've had to get better at.
What, DJ, what made you switch? Why'd you stop?
What, for the brand?
You said you stopped being a perfectionist 2024. So what was the switch? What caused you to say, I can't do this like this? This is not working. I need to
Because
change how I operate.
I was losing my joy. I was like, man, I'm
Yeah, that's
overthinking it.
exactly.
I'm thinking,
Exactly.
okay, if this is not perfect, or if I mess up here and I mumble here, no, it's not gonna be as good. It's not gonna get as many views. I was caring too
Yes.
much about the external, but then I said, if I got to get back to why I started this in the first place, was the
Yes.
love for it, the joy for it. I said, let me get back to that. Whatever happens, the views or whatever, it'll happen as long as you put out your best stuff and you tried your best and gave your all. That's all you could, be thankful for at the end of the day. So that's something I had to relearn again. And I've been doing that ever since. I don't really care about the external stuff. As long as I know I'm putting out my best possible content and I'm researching and stuff, that's what you got. Just like
Exactly.
researching for this interview, researching your questions for
Yep.
you, what
Yep.
you've done. That's what you got to do. And then just put out the best possible stuff. So, yeah, because if you care too much about the external, you're going to be depressed, everything. So I
Yep.
had to learn that again.
So you're wise for yours, right? Some people work their entire lives and never figure that out,
Yeah.
right? Good for you.
You never find no internal happiness if you always care about external validation, ever.
Exact,
Yeah.
100%. That's what it comes down to. And you see people chasing that into the 50s and 60s, and they're just not happy. Even when they find success, it still
Yeah.
doesn't satisfy them. And that's part of the problem because it's never enough. You're trying to fill that hole. It's never enough.
Even
Yeah.
people with money, you hear
Yeah.
stories sometimes. They're like, money is great, which it is, but sometimes it's not everything. Some people are still not happy, even with money. You got to find
Exactly.
internal happiness within yourself and be okay with yourself because money won't solve that. External validation won't solve that. You got to find it within yourself to know, okay, what's wrong with me? I need to figure out this problem. You got to
Yes.
sit with yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're wise beyond your years, man.
Hey, thank you, man. I try. One more question before we get to the quick hitters and the closing.
Got it.
So,
Yep.
what advice would you offer people about building mental health, resilience, and purpose early on, like for
All right,
high
I'll give you
schoolers?
three. All right, there's a ton. I'll give you three,
Yeah,
right? First, understand meaning before motivation, right? What I mean by that is you got to know why your effort matters, even when it's uncomfortable, right? Purpose grows from identity, right? Not outcomes. So know your why behind your why. Number one. That's number one. Two, I would say we touched upon this. You have to normalize the struggle and failures, so to speak, right? As data, it's not a threat, it's not a danger, right? What you see over and over again in people, resilience, motivation collapses when struggle is treated like something you need to eliminate. Like, you know what? Pick your struggle, dude, because you're going to struggle your entire life. It ain't going away, right? Mistakes are information. Discomfort's part of growth. Nerves, it's just about readiness, dude. It's not a weakness. This is energy, right? That matters. And understanding that early on really does help you deal in the long term, right? Developmental model. And I would say third is build response habits, not just emotional control. How's that? So the idea is we're not teaching kids to suppress emotions. We teach them how to accept them because they're real, to understand them, and then what to do next. Right? What are you doing it, right? So to me, resilience is behavioral before it's emotional. You learn that you don't have to respond to that internal emotion in a way that doesn't move you forward, right? You can still have it and still do the right thing at the right time. You could still be value based, right? And that's something that could be taught, right? That's something that can be taught and should be taught early on, right? We don't suppress. We never suppress. You can experience it all and still behave in a way, right, that's value aligned. How's
I like
that?
that. I like that. All you high school kids or any young people out there listening to this, make sure you take those notes. That was great right there. Great job. All right, you ready for some quick hitters?
All right.
What do you ultimately want the Antifragile Academy to represent in 5 or 10 years?
It should be a place where learning teaches that performance and a sense of humanity aren't competing priorities. They could coexist. You could be good and do good and feel good.
What principles should a high performer apply first and why?
First principle high performance should apply. Create stability before intensity. All right. That's not only physiologically, but I'm talking about psychologically, right? Be tethered, be integrated, get your mental game in order, get your sense of self in order before you start pushing harder and harder and harder. Right? Because that pressure is going to make cracks. It's natural. It's going to happen. That's how you're going to grow. When those cracks fill in, you get stronger. But if you don't have stability and a system underneath to deal with it, you're going to fall apart.
What does it truly mean to win on and off the court or field?
To have a life that's thriving, flourishing, it's about transcendence. Whether it's you're religious, it's about something beyond yourself, right? It's to perform well and be the best without losing a sense of self or staying grounded. It's not all about you. It's not about your ego, right? It's about lifting other people up on the way. How are you making the world better? It's not just about you.
What was the pivot moment in your life that brought you along this journey you've been on and are going?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably part of it. It's not just about me.
Yeah.
But I think that success without that kind of internal stability or sense of self or groundedness is just another trap because there's not enough money to fill it. right? There's more to it than that.
One mental performance insight you wish every young athlete or high performer knew.
Dude, hear this one out. This is the big one, right? This is a mentor of mine used to say this all the time. You don't have to feel perfect to perform well. You don't have to feel good to be great, right? You got to have the systems and routines in place. The best in the world can compete with their C game. Their C game, not even their B game, their C game, and still win, right? You could be really good, but if you need your A game to compete all the time, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it, right? You got to be exist in your C game when you don't have a flow state, when you could be clutch when you feel like shit, like Jordan when he was sick. That one, that was to go back, right? You could feel horrible and still execute.
Yeah. Discipline over motivation.
Always, right? Willpower is a very, very weak friend. So is confidence. Trust in the self, trust in the system. That's what matters.
Yeah, definitely. What are your favorite hobbies outside of what you do? What do you like to do outside of your work?
Good. I train, always train, right? I read a lot. I spend time with my kids. I'm on my kids still. He's a D1 baseball player, but I'm his hitting coach. I throw BP with him. I think in order to enjoy your work, it comes down to anything else. You got to have a lot of diverse interests, right? You can't just be all in on one thing because you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
Right? I like cars. I like wine. I'm interested in people, all kinds of people, in every walk of life, right? And I stay curious, right? Every day I wake up, I'm trying to learn something new, right? I don't have the answers.
Exactly. I always say I'm always inquisitive because people are like, "What does that word mean?" I'm like, "Curious." They're like, "Oh,
Curious, man.
Even the vocab." I'm like, because one thing I think that's great about life, we don't know everything about everything. Because there's always something you could learn. If we all knew everything about everything, what's the point of life? Because there's nothing exciting. There's nothing out there we could learn. It'll be dull. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I think, yeah. And now we have access to it. It's free, right?
Yeah.
You can listen to podcasts like this. And when I was young, we didn't have access to any of this stuff, right?
Exactly.
Now it's all free. And
yeah.
So it's at your fingertips. Why not take advantage of that? It's a great time to be alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all this information out there. You could, educate yourself on a lot of things, reading books, podcasts, or even having mentors, wiser people in life. So I always tell young folks, be curious, man. Don't never think you know it all, no matter how much money or whatever you have. Like, there's always stuff you don't know. That's the mindset I always carry. I said, God, no matter if I eventually become wealthy or whatever, nothing, I would always be curious and always listen. That's something I've always done since I was young. So that's always carried me.
Most interesting people. What was that? I'm sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
I was just saying, the most interesting people in the world are people that are curious, right? To be interesting, you have to be interested.
Yeah. Yeah. They always say that too in the what's it called? Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins. They said in the dating, they said be interested in the person, hear them out. Don't try to be interesting.
And here's the beauty of that, because I deal with a lot of relationship issues in my clinical work. And here's the interesting part of it, we're worried about what other people think of us, right?
Yeah. And
that part of your brain that gets stuck in a certain network, it's called the default mode network. It's very self-referential. You're worrying about how you're presenting yourself constantly. Very anxiety-provoking, especially with dating, right? If you're curious about the other person, you're trying to find out about them, that part of your brain shuts down. Another part of your brain turn on that isn't worried about you. So now all of a sudden you can't be nervous because you're curious.
Yeah.
It is the best way to approach any kind of dating system, right? Because now it doesn't matter. Or even in terms of any kind of networking system, like you're not worried about what they're thinking of you. You're worrying about what you can learn about them. It's immensely freeing. Try it. It's a great little approach.
Takes a lot of pressure off your shoulders for sure.
All of it.
Yeah.
Takes it all off because it's not about you anymore.
Definitely. I got to ask you this: top 5 athletes of all time.
Yeah. So it depends on the time of day and the day of the week. I don't know. Try to go across sports. I'm old. I got to say Jordan. I'll probably say Brady, even though I don't like him.
Yeah.
I'll probably say Serena in the female, Messi in soccer, right? And I got to say Tiger, Now on another day, I'm probably going to come up with 10 other people, but
yeah,
I can make an argument for every one of them.
Another day, you'll probably say like Muhammad Ali or Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, I could go through. Yeah, I mean, but for now, I could sit with that.
Yeah, it's so hard.
I can make a strong argument for every.
Usain Bolt, it's a
Yeah,
lot of.
yeah, we could go through the sports, but overall, I think I would say those five. That would work.
I like that five. Who would you like to see on the show? But you must help me get them on the show.
That's a good question.
You did mention your son, D1 baseball player.
I would be curious. Here's what I would here. I'm trying to think of who I would like to see someone who stepped away from elite performance and could speak honestly about the cost of winning.
Hmm.
Right? What cost was it in their life? And that they transitioned out of it now. I'd have to think a little bit more about that.
Okay.
Let me give it some thought. But I'd be curious, somebody who's made that transition.
It's like a former professional athlete.
Who developed another identity after the
Hmm.
fact, who figured it
Yeah.
out, right? Um, yeah, I'd have to think about it, but I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. That'll be a different sector and definitely a good mindset to learn that side of the spectrum of the athlete.
Exactly, right? To think
Yeah.
about the end, right? And how you make that transition. Well, it starts early on, so I think it'll get guys starting and girls much earlier and thinking about you're not going to be an athlete forever, right? You're just postponing time. You're
Yeah.
postponing time to retire. That's what I always say, right? College and pro, it's just more years of postponing because you're going to retire at some
Yeah.
point, and you got to figure
Yeah.
a way what's going to be next. You're not going to lose yourself and your identity.
Yeah. People always joke online about LeBron. He's an alien. He's going to play it for another 400 years. I'm like, guys, he's going to retire probably in the next year or so. So let's
Yeah.
enjoy him while we can. You can already see.
But look what he's been doing though.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been involved with all kinds of stuff in businesses. He's been doing this
Yeah.
all along. That's why he's so he's not going to have the problem.
Yeah. He's been setting
Yeah,
himself up over like this last 5 years, half decade, setting up for retirement, building businesses,
exactly.
becoming minority owners for different sports, stuff like that. So,
Yeah, and that's what you see. Look at Magic, guys like that back in the day, right? They were, they became
yeah.
great businessmen,
Shaq.
but that didn't start the day they retired. They were working
Exactly.
on that all along.
Exactly. He
Yeah,
starts from years before.
exactly.
The last question I always love to ask my guests before closing out the show. When people think of the name Adam Wright, what do you want your legacy to be?
Let me ask you about my legacy. Listen, we talk about the difference between eulogy values, right, and resume values. Have you ever heard of this, right? Like when you're dead and you're laying in your coffin, you're 110. What do you want your son and your wife to say about you, or the people that you coach and work with? You know, honesty, good father, good husband. Kind, honest, integrity, all that kind of stuff. I think is important. But when it comes to the actual professional work, I think what it comes down to, we want to move people from fragile, right, to anti-fragile. What that means is if I can help people to understand that it's not about being harder, right? It's about being sustainable and being adaptable. And that teaching psychological and emotional flexibility is probably one of the most powerful tools that you can develop. And I'm hoping in some way that I'll be associated with that. Its idea is not just a better performer, but a better human being.
No, definitely. Oh, well, you already did it today with me because I'm like, man, I learned a lot of insightful stuff today.
Good. It's good conversation, man.
Yeah, a lot of insightful stuff today. Adam, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I express my gratitude. I know you're a busy guy. And we've been planning this for a little while, probably like the last
Yep.
2 months. I hit you up. I
Yep.
said, hey, Adam, when you mind coming on the show
Yep.
and stuff like that? We had to reschedule. I had to find time to come up with the questions, holiday time, Thanksgiving, Christmas, throw stuff out of whack. So I had to postpone it. But I said, hey, once I finish, I'll let you know. And then we set up a schedule. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you bringing your insights, all the information you brought on the show. I think that's going to help a lot of people. And I just want to thank you so much. Now we have each other. We're connected. And I want to stay in touch. And just thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, DJ. I respect what you're doing. I respect your drive and your energy, and just you're gonna go places, man. It's just good. You got to stay in long enough to get the break, right? That's the deal.
Yeah, that's what breaks people usually.
Yes, you're
Like,
right.
oh, the length. Oh, they had to continue to be consistent. They're like, man, is it worth it? But yeah, I love doing this, man. I love, especially interviews might be my favorite more than even talking sports with my friends, which I love
Just
too,
like to
or
connect.
by myself. But the interviews, getting to know someone's story, the insights, how they
Yes.
overcame adversity, the things they've accomplished. That's my favorite part.
There you go. Curiosity, anti-fragility wrapped up in one. You're living it.
That's the perfect segue to end it off. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the DJ Sports Show. If you listen to audio platforms, leave a 5-star rating. Share anybody you know. I'm your host, DJ Hamilton, on DJ Sports Show, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.